Some people are important. Others just take up space, right, Mom? That was what my son said. Raphael, my son. He raised his glass in front of everyone, smiled, and let those words drop as if they were part of the toast. As if I wasn't there, sitting at the end of the table, watching everyone laugh. It was his birthday. 42 years old. The house was full. There was soft music playing, red wine, plates with leftover food, warm lights that made everything seem perfect. Raphael was standing, wearing that immaculate white shirt that probably cost over $200, his watch gleaming on his wrist, and his wife beside him with that smile that never really included me. I was sitting at the end of the table. Literally, at the end, where they used to put the empty trays or the used napkins. No one asked me where I wanted to sit. No one said anything when I settled in there, because I already knew that was my place now. My son cleared his throat. Everyone fell silent. He raised his glass higher and repeated, looking right at me. Because let's be honest, some people are important. Others just take up space. And then they all laughed. It wasn't an uncomfortable laugh. It was a real, shared laugh, as if they had all been waiting for that moment. As if they all knew who he was talking about. Raphael's wife covered her mouth, but her eyes were shining with amusement. The cousins nodded. Tia Alma lowered her gaze, but she smiled too. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even look down. I just sat there, my glass in my hand, feeling how the silence in my own throat weighed more than any answer I could give. I felt the heat rise up my neck, not from shame, from rage. But a cold, controlled rage, the kind that burns you from the inside but doesn't make you tremble, the kind that teaches you to wait for the exact moment. Raphael kept talking. I mean, you have to be realistic, right? There are people who add value, and there are people who, well, you know. He shrugged. Everyone laughed again. Someone said, "Cheers," and they clinked their glasses. I was still motionless, watching him, remembering when he was 5 years old and cried in the middle of the night because he had a fever. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, putting cold cloths on his forehead, singing to him softly to calm him down. We didn't have money for the doctor. We barely had enough to eat. But I was there, remembering when he was 12 years old and got beaten up at school. He came home with a black eye, his shirt torn, crying with rage and humiliation. I hugged him. I told him he was strong, that he was going to get through it, that it didn't matter what other people said, that I would always be there, remembering when he was 17 years old and wanted to go to college. We didn't have money. I worked double shifts for 2 years to pay for his studies. I sold the jewelry my mother had left me. I sold furniture. I sold everything I owned that had value, except for my dignity. I held on to that. Until today. And now there he was, standing, with his $200 shirt, his watch that cost more than 6 months of my rent, his enormous house that I helped pay for with the first $1,000. I saved cleaning other people's houses, telling me in front of everyone that I just took up space. The laughter continued. Someone told a joke. Someone else asked for more wine. The music got a little louder, and I was still there, at the end of the table, invisible but present, silent but awake. Then I took a deep breath. I set my glass down on the table. I stood up slowly, without making a sound, but everyone noticed. The laughter died down. The conversation stopped. Raphael looked at me, still with that smile, but now with a hint of surprise, as if he didn't expect me to do anything. And I spoke, calmly, without shouting, without trembling. It's a good thing you mentioned that, Raphael, because you're right. Some people are important, and others just take up space. He looked at me, confused. Everyone was looking at me. Nobody moved. I continued speaking. It's a good thing I just bought my own house, 2,000 miles from here. I've already signed. I've already paid. I already have the keys. The silence changed. It was no longer the silence of shared laughter. It was the silence of surprise, of confusion, of fear. Raphael opened his mouth but said nothing. His wife's smile vanished. The cousins looked at each other. Tia Alma looked up. Don't worry, Raphael. You will never again have to put up with me taking up space in your life. I'm leaving, and this time, for good. I grabbed my purse, I turned around, and I walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one said a word. I only heard the sound of my own footsteps on the hardwood floor. And then, the sound of the door closing behind me. It was cold outside, but I didn't feel anything. Only relief, only clarity, only the certainty that I had just done what I should have done years ago. I got in the car. I started the engine. And as I drove through those streets I knew by heart, the same streets where I raised that boy who now despised me, I realized something. I didn't just take up space. I built the space where he now lived. And it was time to build my own. I drove for 20 minutes, with no real destination. I just drove. The streets were empty. It was late. The streetlights illuminated the pavement, wet from the last rain. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. But not from fear, from liberation. Like when you let go of something you've been carrying for so long that you don't even remember what it feels like to live without that weight. I stopped in front of a park. The same park where I used to take Raphael when he was little. Where I taught him how to ride a bike. Where he fell and scraped his knees. And I wiped away his tears, telling him that the pain passes, but the courage to try again is what matters. I turned off the engine. I sat there, in silence, watching the empty swings moving with the wind, and then I cried. Not from sadness, from rage, from helplessness, from years of making myself small so others could feel big, from years of saying yes when I wanted to say no, from years of swallowing my words so I wouldn't ruin the peace of a family that never gave me any peace. I cried for everything I didn't cry at that table, everything I didn't cry when I was seated at the end, like an unwelcome guest in my own son's life. Everything I didn't cry when I heard that shared laughter. That laughter that erased me. But after the tears, something else came. Clarity. The same clarity I'd had 3 months ago when I made the most important decision of my life. The decision no one knew about. The decision I had just revealed at that table. And that changed everything in a second. Because I hadn't spoken on impulse. I didn't say that because I was hurt and wanted to hurt him back. I said it because it was true. Because 3 months ago, I started planning my exit, in silence. Without telling anyone, without asking for permission. 3 months ago, I got a call. It was Leandra, my distant cousin, the one who lives in a small town near the coast, 2,000 miles from this city that no longer felt like mine. She told me a neighbor of hers was selling her house. A small, 2-bedroom house, with a garden out front, and a porch where you could watch the sunset. She sent me photos. I stared at those photos for hours. The house wasn't fancy. It didn't have marble floors or huge windows like Raphael's house. But it had something I hadn't had in years. Peace. Silence. Space that was mine and no one else's. I asked her the price. She told me the owner was asking $60,000. I had $42,000 saved up. I had been saving for years. Putting away every dollar I could, every tip, every extra bit of money I earned, selling cakes on the weekends, mending neighbors' clothes, doing jobs Raphael never knew about because he never asked what I did with my time. I told Leandra I needed to think, but I didn't really need to think. I had already decided. I just needed to get the rest of the money. I sold the gold ring my mother gave me before she died. I sold the antique china I inherited from my grandmother. I sold old furniture I had stored in the back room of Raphael's house, the room where I slept, the room that was more of a storage closet than a bedroom. No one asked, no one noticed, because to them, I was invisible. And that invisibility, for the first time in my life, played to my advantage. In 2 months, I scraped together the $60,000. I called Leandra. I told her I wanted the house. She talked to the owner. We signed papers. I did everything online, in silence, at night when everyone else was asleep, sitting at the kitchen table with the light off so no one would ask me what I was doing. A week ago, I received the keys in the mail. I hid them in my purse. I touched them every day, just to remind myself that they were real, that it wasn't a dream, that I had somewhere to go. And today, when Raphael said what he said, when he humiliated me in front of everyone, when he confirmed what I already knew, that to him, I wasn't his mother but a problem, a burden, something that takes up space. I knew it was time to speak, not for revenge, but for the truth. I dried my tears. I started the car again. I wasn't going back to that house. Not tonight. Maybe never again. I drove to a small motel downtown. A simple, clean place where no one knew me. I paid for one night. I went up to the room. I sat on the bed and looked at my phone. I had 12 missed calls, all from Rafael. 3 messages from his wife, 1 from Tia Alma. None of them said I'm sorry. They all said, we need to talk, or this is a misunderstanding, or you can't just leave like this. I turned off the phone. I lay down. And for the first time in years, I slept without feeling like I owed anyone anything. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was coming through the window. I showered. I got dressed. I went down to breakfast. The coffee was hot, the toast was fresh, and I was alone. But I didn't feel lonely. I felt free. I turned on the phone. More calls, more messages. This time, even the cousins had written. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, if I was really leaving, if I had really bought a house, if I was really going to leave them. I only answered one message. Leandra's. I told her, I'll be there in 3 days. Thank you for everything. Then I deleted the rest. I didn't block anyone. I just didn't answer. Because I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them my time. I didn't owe them anything. I spent that day organizing my things. I didn't have much. My entire life fit into 4 boxes: clothes, a few books, old photos I didn't look at anymore but couldn't throw away, a knitted blanket I'd made years ago, a rosary that belonged to my grandmother. That was it. I didn't have furniture because the furniture belonged to Rafael. I didn't have dishes because the dishes were from his house. I had nothing that was truly mine, except those 4 boxes and the $60,000 I had used to buy my freedom. I hired a small moving company. I told them to come the next day. I gave them the motel's address. I explained it was only 4 boxes. The man looked at me strangely, but didn't ask questions. He just said, "Got it, ma'am. 8 o'clock tomorrow." That night, I slept at the motel again. I turned off the phone again. I felt that strange peace again. That peace that hurts a little because you're leaving a whole life behind, but that also brings relief because you know that life was no longer yours. I thought about Rafael, about the boy he was, about the man he had become. And I wondered at what point I lost one and gained the other, at what point love became dependency, at what point my sacrifice became my prison. I didn't find any answers. I only found more questions. But it didn't matter anymore, because I had already made the decision. And this time, no one was going to stop me. The next morning, as the sun was just starting to rise, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of closing a door that had been open for 67 years. The door to a life I had built with my hands, with my back, with my silence. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and looked out the window. The city was waking up, people walking to their jobs, cars passing, normal life, a life that continued regardless of what was happening inside me. I thought about that table, that damned table where they sat me at the end. I thought about the laughter, about Rafael's eyes when he said those words. There was no doubt in his gaze, no guilt, just certainty, the certainty of someone who knows they can say whatever they want, because the other person won't do anything. But he was wrong. I stood up. I got dressed slowly. Every movement was conscious. Every piece of clothing I put on was a decision. It wasn't just clothes. It was armor. It was preparation for what was coming. I went down to the motel restaurant. I ordered black coffee and 2 slices of toast. The waitress was young. She must have been about 20, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail and a tired smile. She asked if I was visiting the city. I told her no, that I was leaving, for good. She smiled wider and said, "How brave." I didn't know if she meant it or was just being polite, but those words stuck with me. How brave. Was I brave? Or was I a coward? Was it brave to leave? Or would it have been braver to stay and fight? I didn't know. I just knew I couldn't breathe in that house anymore, that every day I spent there made me smaller. that if I stayed one more year, I would disappear completely. I finished my breakfast. I went up to the room. At 8 o'clock sharp, the moving truck arrived. 2 young men, polite. They loaded my 4 boxes as if they were made of glass, even though they were just old cardboard and things with no value to anyone but me. I gave them the address of my new house, 2,000 miles away. They told me it would take 4 days to get there. I paid them half up front, $1,200. It hurt to spend that money, but it was necessary. I couldn't take the boxes with me on the bus. Yes, the bus. Because I didn't have a car. The car I drove that night belonged to Raphael. Everything belonged to Raphael. The house, the furniture, the car, even the plate I ate off of was his. I had nothing. And at the same time, now I had everything. I had a house that was mine. I had keys that only I could use. I had a future that no one else was going to control. I went to the bus station. I bought a ticket for the next day, $530. A 2-day trip with 1 stop in the middle. I didn't care. I needed that time. I needed those hours of silence, of movement, of distance between what I was and what I was going to be. I went back to the motel. I spent the rest of the day alone in the room. I stared at the ceiling. I counted the cracks in the paint. I listened to the sounds of the city through the window. Someone shouting, a car horn, a distant laugh. Life. Life that wasn't mine but was there, reminding me that the world kept spinning. I turned on the phone. More messages, more calls. This time, there was one from Raphael that said, "Mom, we have to talk. This is ridiculous. You can't just leave. Come home, we'll sort this out. Sort this out." As if what happened was a technical problem. As if his words hadn't been real. As if I hadn't been there, sitting at the end of the table, watching everyone laugh at me. I didn't answer. I just put the phone away. I lay down. I closed my eyes. And I went back to that moment. Back to that table. Back to hearing his voice. Some people are important. Others just take up space. I saw all their faces again. Raphael's wife with that hidden smile. The cousins nodding. Tia Alma, who didn't have the courage to defend me. And I wondered how many times it had happened before. How many times they had talked about me when I wasn't there. How many times they had said I was a burden. That I was the problem. That it would be better if I weren't around. Probably many times. Probably for years. But that night was different. That night, they said it in front of me. And that night, I answered. I got out of bed. I went to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 67-year-old woman. Wrinkles around her eyes. Gray in her hair. Hands rough from so much work. Shoulders stooped from carrying so much. But I also saw something else. I saw strength. I saw decisiveness. I saw someone who was still alive, who could still choose, who still had a voice, even if no one had listened to it for years. I went back to bed. I picked up my phone. I wrote a single message. Not to Raphael. To myself. Just 3 words. I'm almost there. I saved it in my notes. I didn't send it to anyone. It was just a reminder. An anchor. A promise. I couldn't sleep well that night. I woke up several times. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that table. I saw that raised glass. I saw that smile. I heard that laughter. But I also saw something else. I saw my new house. I saw the porch Leandra had shown me in the photos. I saw the small garden. I saw a place where no one was going to tell me I was taking up space, because that space was going to be mine. At 5 in the morning, I was already awake. I showered. I got dressed. I went down to the front desk. I paid the bill. 3 nights. $240. I walked out of the motel with my purse on my shoulder and a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't joy. It was something in between. It was the weight of letting go. I walked to the bus station. The streets were still dark. There were a few vendors opening their stalls. A woman selling tamales. A man arranging fruit. It smelled like fresh coffee, like hot bread, like morning. I got to the station. I sat on a metal bench. I waited. I watched people pass by. Families traveling together, couples embracing, children running, and me alone. But I didn't feel lonely. I felt like I was in transition. Like when you're between two places and you don't belong to either one yet, but you know you'll be arriving soon. The bus arrived at 7. I got on. I found my seat. Window. Row 12. I put my purse on my lap. I settled in. I looked out the window. The bus started to move. And as we left the city, as the streets I knew became smaller, more distant, blurrier, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt hope. Small, fragile, but real. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I knew I was going to be. Soon. Very soon. The bus moved down the highway, and I stared out the window without really seeing anything. I thought about how I had gotten here. How a woman who once had her own dreams ended up sitting at the end of a table, being the butt of her own son's joke. I closed my eyes and went back. Much further back. Raphael was born when I was 25 years old. His father left when he was 6 months old. There was no goodbye. No explanation. Just one morning I woke up, and he was gone. He left a note on the kitchen table that said, "I can't handle this. I'm sorry." That was it. 27 words to end a life that was just beginning. I was left alone with a baby who cried every night. With no money, no family nearby, nothing but my hands and the need to survive. I worked every job I could. I cleaned houses. I washed other people's clothes. I watched other women's children while mine slept in a cardboard box I had turned into a crib because I didn't have money to buy a real one. Raphael grew up watching that. He grew up watching his mother leave before dawn and come back after dark. He grew up eating whatever I could buy with the coins I scraped together at the end of the week. He grew up wearing clothes that other mothers threw away, clothes I mended with my own hands to make them look new. But he never lacked for love. He never lacked for attention. Every night, no matter how tired I was, I sat with him. I read him stories. I sang him songs. I told him he was smart, that he was strong, that he was going to be someone important in life. And he was. He graduated from school with good grades. He got into college thanks to the savings I had scraped together for years. He studied business administration. He got a job at a big company. He started making money. Good money. More money than I had ever seen in my life. At first, everything was fine. He would invite me out to eat. He would ask how I was. He would buy me small things. Nothing fancy, but things that meant he was thinking of me. I was proud. I thought all the sacrifice had been worth it, that my son had grown into a good man. But then he met his wife, Fabiana, a woman from a wealthy family, with an education, with that air of superiority you notice from the first moment. The first time I met her, she extended her hand to greet me, but she didn't look me in the eye. She looked at the old dress I was wearing. She looked at my rough hands. She looked at me the way you look at someone who isn't on your level. Raphael didn't notice. Or he didn't want to notice. He was in love. Or maybe he was just in love with the idea of belonging to a world that had always been denied to him. The world of people with money, with important last names, with big houses and new cars. They got married 6 months later. The wedding was expensive. Very expensive. 500 guests. A huge ballroom. Imported flowers. French wine. A dress that cost over $8,000. I helped pay. Not because he asked me directly, but he would drop comments. "Mom, the wedding is so expensive. I don't know how we're going to cover everything." And I, as always, took out my savings. $3,000. Everything I had saved at the time. At the wedding, they sat me at a table in the back. Near the kitchen, far from the main table where Raphael was with Fabiana and her parents. Someone told me it was because there wasn't enough space. I didn't say anything. I just smiled and ate in silence while I watched my son dance with his new wife, surrounded by people who had never cleaned a floor in their lives. After the wedding, things changed. Slowly. So slowly that I didn't realize it until it was too late. The calls became less frequent. The visits, too. When I went to their house, there was always a reason I couldn't stay long. Mom, we have an important dinner. Mom, today isn't a good day. Mom, we're tired. Fabiana stopped pretending to like me. She started making comments. Small. Sharp. Clotilde, that blouse is getting really old. Clotilde, you should dye your gray hair. Clotilde, don't you have anything else to do at your house? Always with a smile. Always with that tone that made her words sound like advice, but were really blows. Raphael didn't stop her. Sometimes he even laughed, as if it were funny, as if I were the joke. Years passed. Raphael prospered. He started his own business. He bought a bigger house. He changed his car twice. He traveled to Europe, to Asia, to places I had only seen in old magazines. And I kept living in the same small apartment where I raised him, working, saving, hoping that one day my son would go back to being the boy who hugged me and told me I was the best mom in the world. But that boy didn't exist anymore. Or maybe he never really existed. Maybe he was just an illusion, a projection of what I wanted him to be. 2 years ago, the owner of the apartment where I lived told me he was going to sell the building, that I had to leave. I panicked. I had nowhere to go. I didn't have enough money to rent another place. The prices had gone up too much. I called Raphael. I explained the situation. There was silence on the other end. Then he said, "It's okay, Mom. You can come live with us, but just for a little while, until you find something." I moved into their house, into the back room, the one they used for storage. Fabiana didn't say anything, but her face said it all. Every time she saw me, she frowned, as if my presence was dirtying her perfect house. Raphael told me not to worry, that it was temporary, that I would find something soon. But months passed, and there were never any conversations about finding me a place. There was only silence, and glances, and that constant feeling of being where I wasn't supposed to be. I started to make myself invisible. I got up early so I wouldn't be in the way in the kitchen. I ate quickly. I locked myself in my room. I went out very little. I spoke even less. I became a ghost in my own son's house. And then that night came, that damned birthday night, when everything exploded, when Raphael said out loud what everyone else was thinking in silence, that I just took up space. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been planning my exit for months, that every dollar I saved, every item I sold, every sacrifice I made was for this, for the moment I could leave, for the moment I could say enough. And that moment came, and I seized it. I opened my eyes. The bus was still moving. Outside, the landscape had changed. There was no more city, just countryside, trees, mountains in the distance, open sky. I took a deep breath. I took the keys out of my purse. I touched them. Cold, real, mine. I smiled, because this time, the space I was going to occupy was going to be mine. And no one, absolutely no one, was going to tell me I didn't deserve to be there. The bus stopped at a rest stop. It was noon. The sun was beating down on the windows. People started to get off to stretch their legs, buy something to eat, use the restroom. I stayed seated for another moment, looking out the window, thinking. I thought about the exact moment I decided to leave. It wasn't that night at the birthday party. It was months before. It was a random afternoon, nothing special, no big fights or hurtful words. It was simply the accumulated weight of hundreds of small humiliations that finally broke me. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes. Fabiana came in, her cell phone in her hand, talking to someone. She didn't look at me. She never looked at me when she was on the phone, as if I were part of the furniture. I heard what she was saying. Yes, it's complicated. No, it's not that she's a bad person. It's just, she's older. She needs things. Attention, space. And we have our lives. Raphael works a lot. Me too. We can't be watching her all the time. Sometimes I feel like, anyway, it is what it is. She was talking about me, as if I weren't there, as if I didn't have ears, as if I weren't a human being with feelings, but a problem that needed to be solved. I kept washing the dishes. I didn't say anything, but something inside me broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it woke up, that part of me that had been asleep for years. That part that used to have dreams, plans, its own voice. The part that I sacrificed for my son, thinking that one day he would thank me for it. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling of the back room, listening to the sounds of the house. Raphael and Fabiana laughing in the living room. The television on. Their normal, happy lives, without me in the picture. And I asked myself, when was the last time I was happy? When was the last time I did something for myself? When was the last time someone asked me what I wanted, what I needed, what I dreamed of? I couldn't find an answer. Because it had been so long that I didn't even remember what that felt like. To be the owner of my own life. The next morning, I started. Slowly. Without telling anyone. I opened a new bank account. One that only I knew about. I started depositing every cent I could save. I stopped buying unnecessary things for myself. I stopped spending money on gifts for Raphael and Fabiana that they never appreciated anyway. I saved everything. Every bill counted. Every coin was one step closer to my freedom. I started selling things. First, the easy stuff. Old clothes I didn't wear anymore. Books I had read 1,000 times. Small trinkets I kept for nostalgia, but that didn't really mean anything anymore. I sold them online, at thrift stores, in Facebook groups. No one asked. No one noticed. Then I sold more important things. My mother's ring. My grandmother's china. Old furniture I had in storage. Every sale hurt, because they were memories. They were pieces of my history. But at the same time, every sale brought me closer to my new life. And that hurt less than staying. The weeks passed. The money grew. $40,000. It was more than I'd ever had at one time in my entire life. I felt powerful. In secret. In silence. But powerful. And then Leandra's call came. My cousin. The one I hadn't seen in years. She called because she had been thinking of me. Because she knew I wasn't happy where I was. Because mothers talk. And even though I had never told her anything directly, she knew. Women always know. She told me about the house. She sent me photos. And when I saw those images, something inside me said, that is your house. That is your place. That is where you will be reborn. I didn't think twice. Well, yes, I did. I thought about it 1,000 times. But every time I thought about it, the answer was the same. Yes, I want that house. I want that life. I want that space that is mine. I talked to Leandra. We negotiated. The owner wanted $60,000. I had 42. I was 18,000 short. It seemed impossible. But I had already done the impossible so many times in my life that I knew I could do it again. I sold more things. Everything that had value. An antique watch that a woman I worked for years ago had given me. A silver bracelet. A wooden dresser I inherited from my aunt. Everything. I sold it all. Without looking back. Without regret. In 2 months, I reached 60,000. I called Leandra. I told her I was ready. She talked to the owner. We signed papers. All online. All in secret. All while I was still living in that house where no one really saw me. Raphael never asked what I was doing at night. He never asked why I spent so much time in my room. He never asked anything. Because for him, I wasn't doing anything interesting. I just existed. I just took up space. And while he was thinking that, I was buying my freedom, signing documents, transferring money, planning my escape. The keys arrived in the mail a week ago. I picked them up from the post office myself. I hid them in my purse. I touched them every night before I went to sleep, just to remind myself they were real, that it wasn't a dream, that soon I would be far away from there. There were hard days, days when I thought that maybe I was being selfish, that maybe I should try to talk to Raphael, explain to him how I felt, give him a chance to change. But then I would remember. I remembered the way he looked at me. I remembered Fabiana's comments. I remembered the times they talked about me as if I weren't there. I remembered that I was no longer his mother. I was his burden. And you don't listen to burdens. You just tolerate them until you can get rid of them. I was going to get rid of them first, not with violence, not with shouting, but with the most powerful decision a woman can make, the decision to leave. I got off the bus. I walked to the small cafeteria in the station. I ordered a coffee and a sandwich. I sat at a table by the window. I ate slowly, watching people pass by, families, couples, people alone, like me, all with their own stories, their own pain, their own decisions. I took out my phone. I turned it on. More messages. This time, one from Tia Alma that said, "Clotilda, please, answer. Raphael is worried. We're all worried. This isn't right. You're his mother. You can't just leave like this." I read the message 3 times. And each time, I got angrier. Because no one was worried when they sat me at the end of the table. No one was worried when they treated me like I was invisible. No one was worried when I cried in silence all those nights in the back room. They were only worried now, because I left. Because I took control. Because I stopped being the submissive mother who accepted everything without saying a word. I didn't answer. I turned off the phone again. I finished my coffee. I went back to the bus. The journey continued. Hours and hours of highway. Of landscapes that changed. Of small towns that appeared and disappeared out the window. And me, just sitting there, feeling how every mile moved me further from my past and closer to my future. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something good for myself. Not for Raphael, not for Fabiana, not for anyone else. For me. Just for me. And that didn't make me selfish. It made me free. The bus arrived at the second rest stop as it was getting dark. We had been traveling for most of the day. My body was tired, but my mind was more awake than ever. I got off to stretch my legs. I bought a bottle of water and sat back down. There were still several hours to go before I reached my final destination. I turned on the phone. I knew I shouldn't, but something inside me needed to see. I needed to know what was happening on the other side. What were they saying? What were they thinking? How were they reacting to my absence? I had 27 missed calls, 18 messages, all from Raphael, Fabiana, Tia Alma, the cousins. There was even one from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. It was from Rodrigo, Raphael's cousin, who barely spoke to me at family gatherings. "Tia Clotilda, is it true you left? Is the house thing true? Raphael is going crazy. He says it's a misunderstanding, that you didn't want to understand the toast, that you're overreacting. But I was there. I heard what he said. And I know you're not overreacting. I just wanted to tell you that." I read the message several times. It was the first one that didn't ask me to come back. The first one that didn't make me feel guilty. The first one that simply acknowledged that what happened, happened. I didn't answer. But I saved the message. Maybe one day I would thank him. Maybe not. But in that moment, I just needed to know that someone else had seen the truth. Then I opened Raphael's message. It was long. Too long. It said things like, "Mom, please, we need to talk. This is ridiculous. You can't make decisions like this without consulting me. You're my mother. You have responsibilities. Families solve things by talking, not by running away." Every word hit me, but not like before. Before, I would have felt guilty. I would have questioned myself. I would have convinced myself that maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I should go back and apologize. But not now. Now I saw the words for what they were. Manipulation. Control. The desperate attempt of someone who lost power and wants it back, because that's what I represented to Raphael. Power. Control. Someone who was always there. Someone who always said yes. Someone who never left. And now that I had left, he didn't know how to handle it. There was another message. This one was more recent. It said, "Mom, if you don't answer in the next few hours, I'm going to come find you. I don't know where you are, but I will find you. You can't do this. Not to me. Not after everything I've done for you." I read that last line 3 times. Everything I've done for you. As if letting me live in the back room of his house was a favor. As if tolerating me was an act of charity. As if I owed him something. And I realized something. Raphael truly believed that. He really thought he had done me a favor. That he had saved me. that I was indebted to him. He never stopped to think about everything I did for him. The years I worked tirelessly to feed him, the nights I didn't sleep because he was sick, the money I spent on his education, his wedding, his life, the sacrifices I made without asking for anything in return. To him, none of that counted, because that's what mothers did. It was my obligation, my duty. It wasn't love. It wasn't sacrifice. It was just what was expected of me. But letting me live in his house, that was a favor. That deserved eternal gratitude. I turned off the phone. This time, I did it with anger. With the anger that comes from years of being invisible, from years of giving without receiving, from years of being treated as less than I was. The bus started moving again. The night had fallen completely. Outside, everything was dark. You could only see the lights of a few towns in the distance. Inside the bus, most people were asleep. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking, kept remembering. I remembered the first time Raphael told me I was a burden. Not in those exact words, but close. It was a year ago. We were in the kitchen. I was making dinner. He came home from work, stressed, tired. Fabiana wasn't there. He sat at the table and said, "Mom, I need to talk to you." My heart stopped. I knew it wasn't going to be good. I sat across from him. "Look," he said, not looking me in the eye. "I know it's been hard for you to be here. And believe me, it's been hard for us too. It's not that we don't love you. It's just that Fabiana and I need our space. And lately, I feel like I don't know how to say this without it sounding bad. Just say it," I told him, because I already knew what was coming. "I feel like your presence here is affecting our relationship." Fabiana complains. She says she has no privacy, that she can't do things the way she wants in her own house. And I don't know what to do. You're my mother. I'm not going to kick you out on the street. But I can't sacrifice my marriage for you either. Sacrifice his marriage for me, as if I were the problem, as if I were there by choice, as if he hadn't been the one to offer me a place to stay when I had nowhere to go. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. I got up. I went back to the stove. I finished cooking. I served dinner. We ate in silence. And after that night, something changed. Or maybe nothing changed. Maybe what had always been there just became more visible. I started to notice more things. The way Fabiana would sigh when I entered a room. The way Raphael avoided introducing me when his friends came over. The way they both spoke in low voices when they thought I wasn't nearby. I overheard them once. They were in their bedroom. I was walking down the hall. Fabiana was saying, "I don't know how much longer I can take this, Raphael. She's your mother, I get it. But this can't be forever. We need to find her something. A home. A small apartment. Something." "I know," Raphael replied. "I know. Give me time. I'll solve it." Solve it. As if I were a problem that needed a solution. As if I were a math equation and not his mother. I kept walking. I didn't say anything. But that night, lying in the back room, I decided that I wasn't going to wait for them to solve me. I was going to solve myself. And I started. I started saving with more intensity. I started looking for options. I started planning my exit. In silence. Because if I had learned anything in that house, it was that my words had no value. Only my actions did. The bus took a sharp turn, pulling me out of my thoughts. I looked out the window. We were entering a small town. There was an illuminated gas station. A store that was open. A few houses with their lights on. Simple life. Quiet life. A life that would soon be mine. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't felt in years. I allowed myself to feel pride. Pride in myself. In my strength. In my decision. In my courage. Because leaving wasn't cowardly. Leaving was brave. It was choosing myself for the first time in my life. It was saying enough. It was reclaiming my voice, my space, my dignity. And no one, absolutely no one, was going to take that away from me. The bus reached its final destination at noon on the second day. I got off with my purse on my shoulder, my legs numb, my body tired, but my spirit strangely light. The station was small, almost empty. There were a couple of taxis waiting outside. I took one and gave him the address Leandra had sent me. The driver was an older man, maybe in his 70s, with completely white hair and a kind smile. He asked if I was new in town. I told him yes, that I had just bought a house. He congratulated me. He said it was a good place to live, quiet, safe, where people still greeted each other on the streets. As we drove through the town streets, I looked out the window. Everything was different. The houses were small, painted in light colors. There were trees on every corner. A few people were walking slowly, in no hurry. There was a square in the center with an old fountain and wooden benches. Everything felt paused, as if time moved slower here. We arrived at my house. My house. I still couldn't believe it. It was exactly like the photos. Small, one-story, with cream-colored walls and a wooden door. There was a garden out front, a bit overgrown, with tall grass and some wildflowers, and a porch with 2 old chairs and a small table. I paid the driver $30. I gave him a tip, 5 more. He thanked me and left. I stood in front of the house, my purse in my hand, looking at what was now mine. I took out the keys, the same keys I had touched every night for a week. I put one in the lock. I turned it. The door opened. I walked in slowly. The inside was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no curtains, just white walls, a wooden floor, and the musty smell of a house that had been uninhabited for months. I walked through each room. The living room, the small kitchen with an old but functional stove, the bathroom with white tiles and a tub that needed cleaning, the 2 bedrooms, one bigger than the other, both with windows that looked out onto the backyard. I stood in the middle of the larger room, the one that was going to be mine. I looked around. Empty, silent, peaceful, and I cried. But this time, not from sadness. From relief, from gratitude, from freedom. I sat on the floor. I took out my phone. I turned it on. More messages, many more. But now there was a different one. It was from Raphael. It said, "Mom, I know where you are. I talked to cousin Leandra. I'm on my way. We need to talk. This isn't going to end like this." I read the message twice. I felt a knot in my stomach. Not from fear, from anticipation. Because I knew this was going to happen. I knew Raphael wouldn't let me go that easily. Not because he loved me, but because he couldn't accept that I had made a decision without his permission. I called Leandra. She answered on the second ring. "Clotilde, you made it." "Yes, I'm at the house." "Thank you for everything, Leandra. Really. You don't have to thank me. It's your house. You deserve it." "Hey, I have to tell you something. Raphael called me an hour ago. He was furious. He demanded I tell him where you were. I tried not to, but he threatened to come anyway. To search the whole town. I don't know. I got scared. I gave him the address. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. It's okay. He was going to find me sooner or later. Better that it's now. Are you sure? I can come over if you want. So you're not alone." "No, I need to do this alone. But thank you." I hung up. I took a deep breath. I looked around. This house was mine. This space was mine. And no one, not even Raphael, was going to take that away from me. 2 days passed. 2 days in which I cleaned the house from top to bottom, in which I bought the bare minimum. A mattress, 2 sheets, 1 pot, 2 plates, 1 glass. I didn't need more. For now, that was enough. I slept on the floor the first night, on the mattress the second. Both nights were the best I'd had in years. Because the silence was mine. Because no one was tolerating me. Because I was in my own space. And then, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, I heard a car pull up outside. I looked out the window. It was Raphael. With his new car, black, shiny. He got out. He looked at the house with a frown, as if he couldn't believe I lived here. As if it were impossible that I had bought something without his help. I took a deep breath. I went out onto the porch. I stood in front of the door. I waited. Raphael walked toward me. He wasn't smiling. He had that expression he wore when he was angry but trying to control it. The expression he used in his business meetings when something didn't go his way. "Mom," he said. His voice was tense. "We need to talk." "Talk," I said. My voice was calm, cold, nothing like the voice I used to use with him, the soft voice, the voice that always gave in. "What is this? What are you doing here? You bought this house? With what money?" "With my money. The money I saved for years. The money I earned working. The money that is mine. You can't do this. You can't just leave like this. Without telling me. Without talking to me. I'm your son. I know. And I'm your mother. But apparently, that didn't mean anything to you when you said what you said at your birthday party." Raphael pressed his lips together. "It was a comment. A joke. You didn't mean it." "I didn't mean it?" Everyone laughed, Raphael. Everyone. And you did too. Looking right at me. Knowing exactly what you were saying. Knowing you were humiliating me. You're overreacting. You always overreact to everything. No. I'm not overreacting. I'm tired. I'm tired of being invisible in your house. Of being treated like a problem. Of hearing you talk about me as if I wasn't there. Raphael took a step back. For the first time, I saw him look uncomfortable, as if he didn't expect me to say that, as if he thought I didn't know. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Yes, you do. I know you talked with Fabiana about putting me in a home. I know you complained that I was taking up space. I know everything, Raphael. Because even if I was invisible to you, my ears worked perfectly." He fell silent, staring at the floor, not knowing what to say. "I came to get you," he finally said, "because you're my mother, because things can be fixed, because we can talk." "No, I'm not going back. You're going to live here? In this middle of nowhere town? In this old house? Alone?" "Yes, that's ridiculous. You're an old woman. You need family. You need support. I need peace. And I didn't have that with you." Raphael threw his hands up, frustrated, angry. "I can't believe you're doing this. After everything I did for you." And there it was again. That phrase, "everything I did for you." "Tell me, Raphael," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "What exactly did you do for me? Let me live in the back room of your house? Tolerate me at your dinner parties? Allow me to exist in your life? Because that's not love, son. That's pity. And I don't need your pity." "It's not pity. It's..." "What? Obligation? Duty? Because that's not love, either." Raphael opened his mouth. He closed it. He had no answer. Because he knew it was true. "I gave you everything," I said. My voice was trembling, but not from weakness, from contained strength. "I gave you my youth, my health, my money, my life. And I never asked for anything in return. Only respect, only to be seen. Only to be treated like your mother and not like a problem. And you couldn't even give me that. Mom, no, not anymore. I'm not the mom who says yes to everything anymore. The one who makes herself small so you can feel big. The one who accepts the crumbs of your attention. That mom stayed at that table, at that birthday party. When you laughed at me, Raphael looked at me. And for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Guilt. Real. Deep. But it was too late. "You can go now," I said. "Go back to your house. To your life. I'm going to be fine here. Alone. In my space. The space I bought with my own money. The space where no one is going to tell me I'm in the way." Raphael didn't move for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, as if he finally understood that he had lost, not his mother, but his control over her. He turned around. He walked to his car. He got in. He started the engine. And he left. I stood on the porch, watching him drive away, feeling how every foot of distance he put between us made me freer. Raphael's car disappeared down the street. I waited until I couldn't even see the dust his tires kicked up. Then I let out the breath I had been holding. My hands were shaking. My legs were, too. But not from fear. From adrenaline. From power. From finally having said everything I had held inside for years. I went into the house. I closed the door. I leaned against it. And then I cried. I cried hard. I cried it all out. I cried for the mother I was, for the son I had, for the relationship we lost, for the years I wasted hoping things would change, for all the times I swallowed my words to keep the peace. But I also cried with relief, because I had finally said it. I had finally stood up to him and shown him that I had a voice too, that I had boundaries, that I deserved respect too. I wiped my tears. I went to the kitchen. I filled a glass with water. I drank it slowly. I looked out the window toward the backyard. It was overgrown, full of weeds, but it had potential. I could see flowers there. I could see a small vegetable garden. I could see myself sitting in a chair, reading a book, drinking coffee, in peace. The next few days were strange, silent. I spent my time cleaning, organizing, buying the essentials. A small table, 2 chairs, a few more pots, towels, sheets, simple curtains for the windows. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just what I needed to live. Leandra came to visit on the 4th day. She brought homemade food, fresh bread, coffee. We sat on the porch and talked. She asked how I was. I told her the truth, that I was scared but also at peace, that I didn't know what was going to happen, but that for the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life. Raphael came, I told her. I know. I saw him drive through town. How was it? Difficult. But necessary. Do you think he'll be back? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. But if he comes back, my answer will be the same. Leandra nodded. She didn't say anything else. She just put her hand on mine. That simple gesture told me more than 1,000 words. It told me I wasn't alone, that I had someone on my side, that I had made the right decision. A week passed. Then 2. Life began to take shape. I got up early. I drank coffee on the porch watching the sunrise. I cleaned up the garden, little by little. I pulled weeds. I planted some flowers I bought at the town market. I was in no hurry. I had all the time in the world. I met my neighbors. Mrs. Miller, a 75-year-old woman who lived alone and made the best tamales I had ever tasted. Mr. Henderson, a widower who tended his garden with devotion and always greeted me with a smile. Jessica, a young single mother with 2 small children who worked at the town bakery. They were all kind. No one asked too many questions. No one judged. They just accepted me, as if I had always been there. My phone kept getting messages, but fewer and fewer. Raphael wrote a few more times. Short, cold messages. I hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything. Never an I'm sorry. Never an acknowledgement of what he had done. Just empty words that meant nothing. I didn't answer. Because I had nothing to say. Because the conversation had ended that afternoon on the porch. Because I no longer owed him my time or my energy. Fabiana also stopped writing. She disappeared from my life as easily as she had entered it, as if she had never meant anything, and she probably hadn't. Tia Alma was the only one who kept insisting. She called me every week. She told me I had to forgive. That family was the most important thing. That I was being selfish. That a mother doesn't abandon her son. One day, I let her talk. I listened to everything she had to say, and when she finished, I told her calmly, Tia, I didn't abandon my son. My son abandoned me years ago. I just finally accepted that reality. She didn't know what to say. She hung up. She didn't call back. And that's okay. Because I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the people you choose. The people who see you. The people who respect you. The people who make you feel like your existence matters. One afternoon, I was watering the garden when I saw an unfamiliar car stop in front of my house. My heart sped up for a moment. I thought it was Raphael again. But when I saw who got out, I calmed down. It was Rodrigo, Raphael's cousin, the one who had sent me that message. He walked toward me, his hands in his pockets. He looked uncomfortable, but also determined. Tia Clotilde, he said, I hope I'm not bothering you. You're not bothering me. What are you doing here? I came to apologize for not saying anything that night, for staying quiet when Raphael said what he said, for being a coward. I looked at him. I saw sincerity in his eyes. I saw real regret. You don't have to apologize, I told him. It wasn't your responsibility to defend me. Yes, it was. You're my aunt, and what happened was wrong. We all knew it, but nobody did anything. And that makes us accomplices. We sat on the porch. We talked for hours. He told me that after I left, there was a big fight in the family, that some were on my side, that others defended Raphael, that the family had split. He told me that Raphael kept insisting I had overreacted, that I had been too dramatic, that I was being ridiculous, but that fewer and fewer people believed him. People are starting to see who he really is, Rodrigo told me, and they don't like what they see. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I just felt sadness, because Raphael was my son, and even though he had hurt me, even though he had humiliated me, even though he had tried to control me, a part of me still loved him. A part of me still remembered the boy he was. But that boy didn't exist anymore, and I had to accept that. Rodrigo left before dark. He hugged me before he left. He told me if I ever needed anything, to call him. I thanked him, knowing I probably never would, but appreciating the gesture all the same. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and my new life became my normal life. I didn't think about Raphael every day anymore. I didn't check my phone hoping for a message. I didn't feel that weight in my chest every time I remembered that night. I started to sleep better, to eat better, to laugh more, to feel like my body was mine again, that my time was mine, that my life was mine. One morning, while I was drinking coffee on the porch, I saw something on the floor. It was an envelope. Someone had left it there during the night. I picked it up. It had no return address, just my name, written by hand. I opened it. Inside, there was a letter. It was from Raphael. Mom, it said, I don't know how to start. I've tried to write this letter 1,000 times. I tear it up every time because I can't find the right words. But today I decided it doesn't matter if the words are right. It only matters that they're honest. You were right. About everything. I treated you badly. I made you feel invisible. I made you feel like you didn't matter. And the worst part is, I did it consciously. I did it because it was easier, because accepting that I was hurting you meant I would have to change. And I didn't want to change. I wanted you to be the one to change, to adapt, to disappear. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come back. I just hope you know that I'm sorry, and that I'm going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. I love you, even if I didn't know how to show it. Raphael. I read the letter 3 times. I felt so many things. Sadness, relief, anger, compassion, all at the same time, but I didn't feel the urge to go back. I didn't feel the urge to forgive him immediately. Because apologies are important, but they don't erase the damage. They don't give you back the lost time. They don't heal the wounds overnight. I put the letter away. Maybe one day I would answer it, maybe not. But for now, I just needed to keep living, to keep healing, to keep being me. I finished my coffee. I looked at my garden. The flowers were shining in the morning sunday. The birds were singing. The wind was moving the leaves gently, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing, being exactly who I was supposed to be, not in someone else's space, but in my own, the space I bought with my sacrifice, with my strength, with my decision to choose myself. And that space wasn't small. It wasn't insignificant. It wasn't something left over. It was mine. It was enough. It was everything. I got up. I watered the flowers. I waved to Mrs. Miller, who was walking down the street. I made breakfast. I opened the windows to let the fresh air in. And as I did all these simple things, I thought about something. I thought that maybe this was the real victory. Not Raphael's letter, not the apology, but this quiet life, this peace that didn't need permission, this freedom that didn't depend on anyone else, I, Clotilde Salas, at 67 years old, had finally found my place. And I would never, ever again let anyone tell me that I just took up space. Because now I knew the truth. I didn't take up space. I created space. And that space was sacred.